The end of World War II did not bring global peace. It marked the beginning of a new conflict defined not by open warfare, but by technological dominance and ideological opposition. This was the Cold War, a tense standoff between two emerging superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Each side vied for global influence, and their battleground stretched from Berlin to Korea, to Cuba, and ultimately, into outer space. In October 1957, the Soviet Union stunned the world by launching Sputnik 1, the first man-made satellite to orbit the Earth. To the American public and government, this was more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a terrifying reminder that the USSR could also launch missiles into U.S. airspace. It shattered the illusion of American technological superiority and sparked widespread panic. President Eisenhower was pressured to respond. As newspapers screamed about a missile gap, the U.S. government scrambled to catch up, pouring unprecedented funding into aerospace programs. This urgency led to the creation of NASA in 1958, tasked with ensuring America would not fall behind again. But while the public focus was on reaching orbit, secret military discussions were unfolding behind closed doors. The idea wasn't just to reach space, but to dominate it. In the shadows of the Pentagon and military research centers, bold and bizarre ideas were tabled. One of the most extreme was the concept of using space as a stage for nuclear display, a move that would prove beyond any doubt that America could strike anywhere, even the moon. And so, a covert plan was set into motion, one that would remain classified for over 30 years. In 1958, the U.S. Air Force, working alongside top scientists and think tanks, initiated a highly classified operation known as Project A119. Officially labeled a study of lunar research flights, its true objective was far from peaceful. The plan? To detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon's surface, not for science but for spectacle. The explosion, they hoped, would be visible from Earth, creating a glowing mushroom cloud rising in the stark blackness of space. This wasn't a science fiction fantasy. It was a serious military proposal backed by funding, physicists, and classified reports. The rationale was chillingly simple: psychological warfare. U.S. officials believed that such a show of force, an atomic explosion on a celestial body, would shake the confidence of the Soviet Union and reassert American supremacy on the global stage. If the USSR could put a satellite in orbit, then America would go one step further and nuke the moon. The timing was strategic. The project was meant to culminate in a launch near the end of the 1950s, just as the space race intensified. Even more astonishing is that one of the consultants on the project was a young Carl Sagan, then a budding astrophysicist. His role involved calculating how dust and light would react to the blast in the moon's low-gravity, atmosphere-free environment, ensuring the explosion would be as visually dramatic as possible from Earth. Every detail was considered, from bomb yield to optimal detonation angle. However, buried beneath the ambition was a sense of unease. The scientists involved were deeply aware of the risks: scientific, environmental, and political. The idea of detonating a nuclear device on a pristine celestial body clashed with the growing view of space as a place for exploration, not militarization. But during the paranoia of the Cold War, even the unthinkable became possible. And for a brief moment in history, humanity truly considered turning the moon into a battlefield. Among the most surprising details of Project A119 was the involvement of a brilliant young scientist who would later become one of the world's most celebrated science communicators, Carl Sagan. At the time, Sagan was a graduate student with a promising future in astrophysics. He was brought into the project not for his fame, which had not yet arrived, but for his mathematical brilliance and deep understanding of planetary atmospheres and cosmic phenomena. Sagan's specific task was to help calculate the visual effects of a nuclear detonation on the moon's surface. Unlike Earth, the moon has no atmosphere, meaning a nuclear explosion would not produce a mushroom cloud in the conventional sense. Instead, it would throw up dust and debris in a uniquely stark and haunting way. illuminated by the sun and visible from Earth through powerful telescopes. The U.S. military wanted this visual spectacle to be unmistakable, dramatic, and intimidating. His involvement came to light decades later, when researchers uncovered declassified documents and personal notes revealing Sagan's contributions. The irony was not lost on the scientific community. The man who later championed peace, exploration, and scientific integrity had once worked on a top-secret plan to nuke the moon. Sagan never spoke publicly about it in his lifetime, likely due to the project's classified nature, but his participation is now a sobering reminder that even the brightest minds can be drawn into the darkest corners of military ambition, especially in an era driven by fear and global competition. To understand why the United States even considered nuking the moon, one must understand the psychological dynamics of the Cold War. This was not just a military standoff, it was a battle for global perception. Superiority wasn't measured only in missiles or tanks, it was demonstrated in symbols, optics, and technological theater. And the moon, always present in the night sky, was the ultimate canvas for power projection. Detonating a nuclear bomb on the moon was not about destruction, it was about sending a message. A carefully timed and precisely aimed explosion, visible from Earth, would scream American dominance to every rival, ally, and citizen watching. It would say, "We control space, we control the future." Unlike tests conducted in remote deserts or hidden atolls, this would be celestial spectacle warfare, a public declaration of supremacy written across the sky. There was also scientific curiosity embedded in the strategy. Officials argued that the detonation could reveal geological information about the moon's surface and crust. But make no mistake, these justifications were secondary. At its core, Project A119 was about intimidation, not investigation. The moon was chosen because it was neutral ground, no sovereignty, no ownership, no immediate human presence. But its universal visibility made it strategically priceless. Had the plan gone forward, the moon might today bear the scars of mankind's arrogance, a nuclear crater etched into its surface, forever reminding us that even the heavens were not safe from Cold War madness. As Project A119 quietly advanced, unease began to grow among the very minds tasked with executing it. Beneath the surface of technical planning and military ambition, a profound debate simmered. Should humanity really detonate a nuclear weapon on the moon? While some military strategists saw only the strategic reward of such an act, many scientists saw the irreversible consequences, both tangible and symbolic. From a scientific standpoint, the risks were staggering. While the moon had no atmosphere to carry radioactive fallout like Earth, the detonation could still contaminate the lunar surface with radioactive isotopes, potentially affecting future exploration. There was also uncertainty about how the blast might alter the moon's structure. What if it triggered unforeseen seismic activity or fractured the surface? Unlike Earth, where tests had some precedent, no one knew what would happen on a celestial body with vastly different gravity and geology. Ethically, the implications were even more severe. The moon, a natural satellite admired and revered across cultures for millennia, would become the first victim of space militarization. Many in the scientific community quietly recoiled at the thought. The moon had become a symbol of human aspiration and curiosity, especially with the public excited by talk of exploration and potential moon landings. Turning it into a nuclear target felt like a betrayal of that hope. Behind closed doors, these concerns were voiced more forcefully. Some scientists feared public backlash if the project was ever exposed. Others worried about escalating an already dangerous arms race, potentially pushing the Soviets to consider their own space-based weapons programs. The project teetered between bold demonstration and reckless provocation, and the line between the two grew increasingly thin. Ultimately, cooler heads prevailed. Project A119 was quietly canceled, never making it past the planning and theoretical stages. The precise reasons for its termination were never publicly explained, but historians believe the decision was shaped by a mix of ethical concerns, scientific pushback, and shifting strategic priorities. As NASA gained momentum and a new vision emerged, one focused on manned spaceflight and peaceful exploration, the notion of nuking the moon began to feel not only dangerous but counterproductive. The United States instead redirected its energy toward Project Mercury and eventually Project Apollo, focusing on achieving the first manned moon landing, a far more inspiring and globally resonant goal. The space race continued, but with missions that looked forward rather than back, building legacies rather than destroying symbols. As for Project A119, it was buried, both literally and figuratively. The documents remained classified for decades, tucked away in military archives, unknown to the public and unacknowledged by its participants. Even Carl Sagan's involvement remained secret until his graduate school application accidentally revealed references to the classified work decades later. When the truth finally emerged in the 1990s through declassified files and journalistic digging, it stunned the world. The idea that the U.S. had seriously considered nuking the moon sounded like dystopian science fiction, but it had been real. In an age defined by fear, ambition, and the ever-present shadow of the mushroom cloud, it was yet another chapter in the dangerous brinkmanship of the Cold War. For decades, the existence of Project A119 was locked away in the classified corridors of Cold War secrecy. It wasn't until the 1990s, long after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that the world began to learn the truth. Through a combination of Freedom of Information Act, FOIA requests, academic curiosity, and declassified military documents, researchers slowly pieced together the details of the plan that once aimed to turn the moon into a nuclear billboard. The biggest revelations came not from mainstream headlines, but from quiet corners of scholarly research. In 2000, author Leonard Reifel, a physicist and former U.S. government consultant, revealed that he had directed the secret program in the 1950s. His disclosures confirmed that the U.S. had not only planned to detonate a bomb on the moon, but had taken the idea seriously enough to calculate blast radius, optical visibility, and even public impact. These revelations caused a mixture of disbelief, outrage, and fascination. For many, it felt like the plot of a sci-fi thriller. But this was not fiction. It was a real government-funded initiative, rooted in real fear, involving real nuclear weapons. When people learned that a young Carl Sagan was involved, it sparked further reflection on how the Cold War had corrupted even the most idealistic corners of science. Conspiracy theorists leapt on the information. Skeptics claimed this was just the tip of the iceberg, that if such a wild plan had existed in the open, what else remained hidden? Meanwhile, historians and ethicists were more concerned with the broader implication. What did this say about humanity's willingness to violate the natural world for the sake of power? Project A119 became a symbol of just how far governments were willing to go during the Cold War. In their desperate bid to appear stronger, smarter, and more capable than their enemies, they nearly did the unthinkable, turning space, the final frontier, into a nuclear stage. Though the moon was never bombed, Project A119 left a permanent imprint on history, not as an act committed, but as an act almost committed. Its legacy is not in craters or radiation, but in what it reveals about the psychology of power, the ethics of science, and the fragility of restraint under pressure. In the years since its declassification, Project A119 has become a cultural artifact referenced in books, documentaries, online forums, and speculative fiction. It captures the surreal audacity of the Cold War era, a time when the threat of nuclear annihilation was not just possible, but constantly imminent. The moon, once a symbol of mystery and romance, had almost become a casualty of geopolitical posturing. The project also sparked discussions about space law and ethics. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty, signed by the United States and the Soviet Union, explicitly banned the placement of nuclear weapons in space and forbade the use of the moon for military purposes. Many now view Project A119 as one of the catalysts for such agreements, a sobering example of what the future might look like without diplomatic limits. For the scientific community, it served as a cautionary tale. Just because something is technically possible doesn't mean it should be done. And for the public, it reminded us that history is filled with secrets, some forgotten, some buried, and some so absurd they feel unreal. until they are revealed. The moon, thankfully, remains untouched. But the knowledge that world powers once considered violating it with atomic fire should never be forgotten. It's a story that underscores a crucial truth. The greatest threats often come not from enemies, but from ourselves. The most chilling part of Project A119 isn't just that it existed, it's how close humanity came to actually doing it. The I plan was not a mere scribble in a forgotten file. It was developed, reviewed, and nearly implemented. And that forces us to ask one haunting question. What if they had gone through with it? If a nuclear bomb had detonated on the moon's surface, the consequences would have stretched far beyond the Cold War. The explosion may not have physically destroyed the moon, but it would have scarred it forever, a visible reminder of mankind's willingness to assert power through destruction. It could have fractured the global image of space as a realm of peace and exploration. Future missions, scientific or civilian, might have been colored with radiation fears and political distrust. The moon, instead of being remembered as the place where humanity first stepped into the cosmos, would have been known as the place we first tried to dominate through force. The blast might have also triggered a dangerous chain reaction, a militarized space race, where nations competed not to explore the universe but to control it with weapons of mass destruction. Satellites could have been fitted with nukes. Asteroids could have been targeted. The sky might have become another battlefield, but perhaps most disturbingly, such an act could have normalized the use of nuclear weapons in space. Once done, it would have been impossible to undo, ethically, politically, symbolically. The very idea of space as a shared frontier might have collapsed under the weight of mistrust and fear. Instead, the world narrowly avoided this dark path. Project A119 was shelved. NASA moved forward with Apollo. And in 1969, the moon became a symbol of hope, not war, when Neil Armstrong took that giant leap for mankind. Yet the story of Project A119 remains important. It reminds us that technological power without ethical restraint is dangerous. That fear, no matter how justified, should never guide the hand of science, and that in moments of global tension, it takes only a few signatures to turn imagination into devastation. Today, when we look up at the moon, we see it as it always has been. Silent, serene, scarred only by ancient craters, not by man's recklessness. But now we know. It almost carried the burn mark of a bomb meant to prove a point. Let that memory guide us, not as a tale of what we did, but as a warning of what we must never do again.